I had exactly 9 minutes before the chief of police arrived, which is why I nearly dropped my coffee when the front door to my mountain lodge slammed open so hard the antler coat rack rattled. In marched a woman in a leopard print parka, dripping melted snow onto the Persian rug I'd inherited from my grandmother. She didn't even look at me. She went straight to the fireplace, adjusted the logs, then turned and announced, "This is a safety violation. I'll be reporting it." I stared, trying to decide if this was a fever dream or just Tuesday. She was the president of the Valley's HOA, though my property sat on 5 acres of land outside their jurisdiction. That didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. In her mind, the mountains, the trees, and apparently my living room all fell under her dominion. "You can't have an open flame this close to a window," she said, pulling a clipboard from her enormous handbag like a sheriff drawing a pistol. I reminded her, very politely, that this was my private lodge, not subject to HOA rules. She smirked, like I told her gravity was optional. "We'll see about that. You have a guest arriving, yes? Chief Bennett? I'll need to speak with him directly. This community has concerns about his involvement." She said involvement, like most people say. Felony. That was when I realized her timing wasn't just intrusive, it was strategic. She wanted to be here when the chief arrived, to insert herself into whatever conversation we were about to have. I asked how she even knew he was coming. "We have eyes," she said. The way she said it made me wonder if she actually meant binoculars. I'd dealt with Karens before, but never one who stormed into my house minutes before a meeting with the most powerful law enforcement officer in the county. My brain flipped through possible outcomes. If I threw her out, she'd make a scene on the porch, and the chief would see it. If I humored her, she'd dig in like an Alabama tick and refuse to leave until she got what she wanted, whatever that was. I tried the diplomatic route. Offered coffee. She declined, sniffing that she didn't consume caffeine from unverified sources. Then she wandered toward the windows, pulled back the curtains, and began commenting on my landscaping choices like a city inspector with a grudge. "Those pines should be trimmed to exactly 7 feet. And is that a deer feeder? Those attract bears, you know." I reminded her that I'd been living here for years without a single bear incident. She squinted at me, clearly trying to decide whether I was lying or simply incompetent. "You'll see," she said. "We can't have someone flouting community safety like this. It sets a precedent." 5 minutes to go. I glanced at my watch. She noticed. "Nervous?" she asked, in a tone suggesting she already knew the answer. I told her I was simply waiting for my guest. That's when she smiled, an unsettling, slow curve of her lips that said she had a card up her sleeve. "Wouldn't it be a shame," she said, "if the chief heard about the noise complaints?" I almost laughed. I live half a mile from my nearest neighbor. But she explained that several residents had reported loud engines, barking dogs, and suspicious shouting coming from my property at odd hours. I asked if those residents had names. She said they preferred to remain anonymous. 3 minutes. I could hear the crunch of tires on snow outside. She moved closer to me, lowering her voice. "It's not too late to work with us. The HOA is prepared to overlook certain discrepancies if we can count on your cooperation." I asked her what cooperation meant. She tapped her clipboard. "We'll start with the fireplace. Then the feeder. Then we'll discuss the fencing, oh, and the structure you're building out back." I froze. She shouldn't have known about that. The workshop was hidden behind a line of pines. "What structure?" I asked. She feigned innocence. "We all see things. Best to keep everything above board, don't you think?" The knock on the door saved me from answering. I stepped toward it, but she was faster, swinging it open herself. "Chief Bennett," she said warmly, like they were old friends. "We were just discussing some pressing safety concerns in your jurisdiction." The chief looked from her to me, his brow furrowed. "Pressing safety concerns?" he repeated. She nodded and stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. "Yes. I think you'll agree once you hear the details." I knew right then she wasn't just here to cause trouble, she was here to hijack my meeting entirely. And judging by the chief's wary glance, she'd already laid some groundwork before today. This was about more than a fireplace. This was a move in a bigger game. And if I didn't figure out the rules fast, I was going to lose before I even knew what I was playing. The chief didn't take his boots off, which told me he wasn't planning to stay long. Karen, though her actual name was Marlene, immediately claimed the wingback chair by the fire, crossing her legs like she'd just been invited to testify in front of Congress. She patted the armrest twice, as if to signal she was ready to begin. "Chief," she said, "you may not realize it, but there are dangerous conditions developing in this community. I have documented everything." She raised her clipboard like a priest lifting a relic. Bennett glanced at me. His face was neutral, but I knew him well enough to read the question in his eyes. How much of this am I supposed to listen to? I gave him the faintest shrug, the one that meant play it your way. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" he said. She started with the fireplace. How the logs were stacked. The distance to the window. How the smoke might affect air quality for sensitive residents. Then she moved on to the deer feeder, claiming it was practically an engraved invitation for bears to stage a home invasion. "I have a map," she said, pulling a folded sheet from her bag. It was a hand-drawn sketch of the valley with my property circled 3 times in red marker, as if I were a military target. She tapped the circle with a manicured finger. "Here. This is the epicenter of the problem." Bennett kept his expression flat. "The problem being that certain individuals believe they are exempt from the community standards that keep us all safe," she said, and then, with a glance at me, "standards which most of us are happy to follow." I leaned back against the hearth. "I'm not in your HOA, Marlene." She smiled like a cat finding the canary still breathing. "That's the technicality you've been hiding behind. But the HOA's charter covers the extended neighborhood, and there's precedent for enforcement beyond the formal boundary. In 2014, the Jackson property was not my jurisdiction," Bennett cut in. Her eyes flicked to him. "Not yet." It was a strange thing to say, and I saw Bennett's posture change ever so slightly. Marlene noticed, too. She softened her voice, made it conspiratorial. "I'm just saying, we have to be proactive. Especially about construction projects." She was circling the workshop again. The one nobody should know about. "What construction project?" Bennett asked. I opened my mouth, but Marlene beat me to it. "A large outbuilding, hidden behind the north tree line. I have reason to believe it's being built without the proper permits." "That's not HOA business," I said. "No," she agreed, "but it is county business. And the county listens to us. We keep them informed about violations, safety hazards, questionable activities." She let that last phrase hang in the air. Bennett turned to me. "You building something?" "Yes," I said. "A workshop. On my own land. Permits are filed." Marlene gave a small, pitying laugh. "Filed is not the same as approved." I could feel the temperature in the room dropping, even though the fire was still going strong. This wasn't about community safety anymore. She was baiting a hook. Bennett checked his watch. "Look, I didn't come up here for zoning disputes." Marlene sat forward. "Then you came for what?" He hesitated. That was new. Bennett never hesitated. "Official matter," he said finally. "Between me and the lodge owner." That was my cue. "Marlene, we need privacy." She didn't move. "Anything that affects the community is my business." Bennett's patience thinned. "Not this." That should have been the end of it. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Then perhaps you'd like to see this before you continue." She handed it to him like she was serving a warrant. He opened it, read the single sheet inside, and his jaw tightened. When he looked up, his eyes went from her to me, then back to her. "Where did you get this?" "Anonymous source," she said, almost sing-song. Bennett folded the paper, slid it into his coat pocket, and stood. "We're done here." "With me?" she asked. With both of you, he said. She rose too, clearly unhappy with that outcome. I think you should take this seriously, Chief. For everyone's sake. Bennett didn't answer. He just walked out, crunching down the snowy path toward his truck. I closed the door and turned to her. What was that? She slipped the clipboard back into her bag. Call it a public service. Or a threat. She tilted her head. Sometimes the difference is in the eye of the beholder. Then she left, leaving behind the smell of her perfume and the feeling that I'd just been shoved onto a chessboard without knowing which piece I was. I watched her red SUV crawl down the mountain road, disappearing into the trees. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Bennett. The message was short: meet me at the diner. Now. I grabbed my coat, locked up, and drove the winding route into town. The diner was half empty, the kind of quiet that made every fork scrape sound like an alarm. Bennett was in the corner booth, coffee in hand. She's dangerous, he said before I'd even sat down. She's an HOA president. She's also sitting on something she shouldn't have. What was on that paper? He hesitated again. Not here. Then where? He slid a napkin across the table. On it, he'd scribbled an address I didn't recognize. Tomorrow. Noon. Bring whatever you're building in that workshop up to speed. You might need it. I stared at the napkin. Why? Because if she's involved, you've got less time than you think. He stood, tossed some bills on the table, and left. I sat there, watching the steam curl off my coffee, realizing that whatever game Marlene was playing, the stakes had just climbed from annoying to dangerous. And I still didn't know the rules. By sunrise, the lodge felt less like a refuge and more like a glass house. Every creak of the wood, every shift in the wind, felt like someone watching. I pulled on a jacket, stepped outside, and stood for a long minute just listening to the pines move in the cold air. No cars. No footsteps. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already behind. The workshop sat 50 yards from the back porch, hidden behind a curtain of snow-dusted evergreens. I'd designed it that way, secluded, invisible from the road. It was meant for one project only, a machine I'd been building for months. Something I'd intended to debut on my own terms. But after Bennett's warning, up to speed, had taken on an entirely new urgency. I unlocked the steel door and stepped inside. The smell of machine oil and sawdust hit me instantly. The frame stood in the center of the room, a skeletal structure of steel and hydraulics under a tarp. I pulled the cover back. The machine wasn't finished, close, but not enough to be useful. Bennett had said I might need it. I had no idea for what. Before I could get to work, the sound of tires on snow made me freeze. Through the slit between two pine trunks, I caught the flash of a white SUV slowing near my property line. It idled there for a full minute before rolling on. I didn't have to guess who it belonged to. Marlene's son drove that model. I worked until my hands were numb, welding joints, tightening bolts. Every few hours I'd check the road. Twice more, the SUV cruised by slow enough to count my fence posts. By noon, I was on the highway toward the address Bennett had given me. It wasn't in town. It was up a side road most people forgot existed, the kind that wasn't plowed unless a plow driver felt generous. The mailbox was unmarked. The house itself looked abandoned, peeling paint, windows boarded from the inside. I knocked. Bennett opened the door almost instantly, like he'd been waiting. He led me through a narrow hallway into a back room where the boards were off the windows and the light cut across a table covered in files. He didn't waste time. That paper Marlene gave me yesterday? It's a partial list of county property records, altered. Your lodge is on it, flagged in red. Flagged for what? Acquisition. I laughed once sharp. She's trying to buy me out? Not buy. Force. The HOA's been pushing to expand jurisdiction. She's been meeting with a developer who wants this ridge for luxury cabins. If your land gets marked as a safety hazard or a zoning violation, the county can condemn it. Once that happens, they sell it to the highest bidder. And she thinks the workshop is her way in. Exactly. She gets evidence that's unpermitted, unsafe, or, better yet, criminal, and she hands it to the county. I leaned on the table. So what was the point of you calling me here? He slid a folder across. Inside were photos, grainy, telephoto shots of my property taken from the tree line. Some were of the lodge. Others were of me hauling crates into the workshop. These came to me anonymously 3 days ago, Bennett said. I think she's been building her case longer than you realize. And the envelope she gave me yesterday? That was bait, to see how I'd react. She's using you to pressure me. And if she's working with the developer, she's not doing it alone. He tapped one photo. That's not her taking these shots. That's someone with equipment and training. I scanned the tree line in the picture. My pines. My snow. My land. Bennett leaned back. Whatever you've got in that workshop, make sure it's legal. Make sure it works. And make sure you can move it if you have to. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that feels like the pause before a storm. Then his phone buzzed. He read the screen, swore under his breath, and stood. She's already in motion. What now? Noise complaint. Filed with the county this morning. Claims of industrial-level machinery operating without soundproofing. If they send an inspector, you'll have 24 hours notice, if you're lucky. I left with the folder under my arm, my tires crunching back down the road toward the highway. Halfway home, a county truck passed me going the other way. By the time I reached the lodge, I'd decided on 2 things. 1, I wasn't giving Marlene an inch, and 2, she wasn't the only one allowed to play offense. I spent the rest of the afternoon making calls, to a friend in the assessor's office, another in the fire marshal's department. I didn't mention her name. I just asked about hypothetical property disputes and the timing of county condemnations. The answers weren't comforting. At dusk, I stood on the porch, looking out over the snowfield toward the road. That's when I saw it, a figure in a parka, just inside the tree line, perfectly still. Watching. The instant I stepped forward, they turned and disappeared into the woods. I didn't chase them. Whoever it was, they'd be back. People like Marlene never send a scout just once. Instead, I went inside, locked the doors, and pulled the tarp off the machine again. The welds were still cooling, the frame solid now. It wasn't finished, but it was closer. And as the wind picked up outside, I realized that the rules of her game didn't matter anymore. I was about to start playing mine. The next morning, the valley woke under a steel-gray sky, and so did I, with a cold knot in my gut that wouldn't loosen. The last 72 hours had sharpened every sense, and the creeping feeling that Marlene's web was closing in wasn't paranoia. It was fact. I found myself scanning the windows every time the wind rattled the shutters, expecting to see those piercing eyes again, lurking beyond the pines. Coffee did little to warm me, but I needed a clear head. The workshop demanded attention, but so did the question gnawing at me: who else was tangled in Marlene's scheme? That developer Bennett mentioned, what was his stake in all this? Was he just some opportunist or someone with deeper roots in the valley's undercurrents? I locked up the lodge and headed down the mountain to the general store, hoping for answers and maybe a friendly face. Inside, the usual crowd milled about, old-timers exchanging stories, hunters picking up supplies, and the cashier who knew everything but said little. I made my way to the bulletin board, scanning notices and flyers, when an unfamiliar face caught my eye, a man standing alone near the back, watching me with the kind of casual intensity that's unsettling in a small town. He introduced himself as Marcus, a real estate consultant new to the area. His smile was practiced but genuine enough. "You must be the lodge owner," he said, voice low. "I hear you're the one causing a stir." I kept my tone light but cautious. "I prefer making waves, thank you. What brings you up here?" "Just looking to help folks make smart investments," he said. "Though I'm sensing some resistance. People don't like change, especially around here." I nodded, pretending not to notice the subtle edge in his words. "Change can be expensive." "Exactly. And sometimes it's about clearing the way for progress. You know how these things go, small towns, big plans. The conversation was a minefield, but I pressed on. Any connection to Marlene's HOA? He chuckled. Let's just say I know the players. Marlene's got ambition, and ambition attracts attention. Before I could ask more, a crackling voice interrupted us over the store's PA. Attention shoppers, please be advised the county will be sending an inspection team to the mountain properties tomorrow morning. Marcus's eyes flicked to mine. Looks like your workshop's about to get company. Back at the lodge, I spent the afternoon preparing. I couldn't halt the county's inspection, but I could control the narrative. I gathered every permit, blueprint, and safety certificate related to the workshop. If they wanted to play by the rules, so would I. But rules only mattered if the game was fair. Marlene's earlier move suggested otherwise. The anonymous complaints, the photographs, this was a calculated assault on my property rights, thinly veiled as community concern. That evening, as the last light bled from the sky, I walked the perimeter of the workshop, checking locks, reinforcing windows. The machine sat covered but ready, its unfinished frame gleaming under the weak moonlight. I wondered how much longer I could hold the line. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of meetings and threats, of eyes watching from the shadows. When dawn finally broke, it brought with it a convoy of official vehicles, a county inspector, a couple of deputies, and, to my surprise, Chief Bennett. The inspector was a wiry woman named Harper, clipboard in hand and no patience for pleasantries. She wasted no time, pacing the workshop floor, snapping photos, and making notes. Bennett stood beside her, his expression unreadable. I answered questions calmly, presenting permits and explaining the purpose of every tool and machine. Harper's pen never stopped moving, but her eyes held something unreadable. Was it doubt, suspicion, or something else? Hours passed like this, a relentless interrogation under fluorescent lights. When Harper finally closed her folder, she announced the inevitable. A full safety audit would be required before any further work could continue. I nodded, expecting the blow, but it still landed hard. Bennett pulled me aside. This isn't just about permits anymore. The HOA's pushing hard, and there's pressure from above. Pressure? I echoed. County commissioners want this wrapped up quickly. Marlene's made some powerful friends. The implications hit me like a freight train. This was no longer about a rogue HOA president, it was a coordinated campaign with political teeth. That night, I sat by the fire, staring into the flames as if they could burn away the threat. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It read simply, "We're watching." No signature. No hint of who. Just a reminder that this battle was far from over. I realized then that Marlene's invasion of my lodge was just the opening move in a war I hadn't asked for but couldn't avoid. And the mountain was about to become a battlefield. The sun had barely risen when the first snowflakes began to fall, dusting the mountain like a warning written in white. I stood at the edge of my property, watching the flakes swirl, each one a silent messenger of the Cold War that had erupted between me and Marlene's HOA faction. The inspection had come and gone, leaving behind an official notice demanding immediate compliance on a list of new safety enhancements. The irony was sharp. I was being told how to be safe by the same people who'd stormed into my home uninvited and watched me like a hawk for weeks. The workshop, still unfinished, now felt less like my personal project and more like a target pinned to the mountain. Every time I heard a crunch of boots in the snow or the hum of an engine on the road, I braced for the next intrusion. Marlene's influence was spreading, and with it came a parade of bureaucrats and enforcers ready to shut me down on behalf of some unseen developer who saw my land as a commodity to be carved up and sold. I had no illusions about the stakes anymore. This wasn't just about building permits or HOA rules. It was about control. Power wielded by people who thought they could erase my existence here with a signature or a rumor. That morning, as I fortified the workshop door with extra locks, My phone buzzed with a text from Bennett. It was terse. Meet at the ranger station. Urgent. I didn't hesitate. The ranger station was a small, weathered cabin perched on the edge of the forest, a place where few visitors came unless they were lost or wanted to be found. Bennett was already there when I arrived, pacing beside his truck, his face grim. Something's changed, he said without preamble. Marlene's gone public. She's called a community meeting to discuss the mountain safety crisis you supposedly represent. I frowned. Public? She never mentioned that. She likes to keep things under wraps until the last minute. It's set for tonight at the town hall. Then we need to be there. I want to hear what she's saying firsthand. Bennett nodded. Good. Because she's not just pushing for more regulations, she's calling for a vote to give the HOA legal authority over the surrounding lands. Including yours. I swallowed hard. If that passed, it would be the end of my sanctuary, the end of my rights as a landowner. The hours crawled by. I'd prepared for the meeting, reviewing every document, every email, every photograph that could prove my case. Bennett advised me to keep calm, but the fire inside me was growing hotter by the minute. The town hall filled quickly that evening, faces I recognized from the grocery store, the gas station, neighbors who smiled politely but whispered behind their hands. Marlene took the stage first, her presence commanding. She painted a picture of danger, wildfires sparked by careless owners, unauthorized construction threatening wildlife corridors, noise disrupting the peace. Her voice was steady, convincing, and laced with an urgency that resonated with the crowd. Then it was my turn. I stepped up, heart pounding but voice steady. I spoke about stewardship, respect for the land, and the right to privacy. I shared my vision for the workshop, a place of creation, not destruction, and how I'd worked within the law at every step. I revealed the anonymous threats, the photographs taken without consent, and the calculated campaign to displace me. Some in the crowd nodded. Others shifted uneasily. Marlene's supporters whispered, casting sideways glances. Then came the twist that nobody saw coming. A man in the back stood up. It was the developer Bennett had mentioned, the real estate consultant Marcus. His suit was sharp, his smile colder than the mountain night. He spoke plainly. This isn't just about one lodge or one workshop. It's about the future of this valley. Growth means jobs, means prosperity. The HOA's proposal is a step toward organized development that benefits everyone. The room erupted in murmurs. The vote was coming. I looked at Bennett. His jaw was clenched. When the ballots were cast, the decision was close but decisive. The HOA's expanded authority passed. Marlene beamed, triumphant. I felt the ground shift beneath me. But I wasn't finished. In the days that followed, I doubled down. I hired a lawyer, appealed to county officials, and reached out to local environmental groups. I documented every interaction, every violation, every threat. Marlene responded by tightening the screws, sending more inspectors, issuing fines, and even posting "No trespassing" signs around my land. Then, one night, the unexpected happened. My workshop was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but the machines were sabotaged, wires cut, control panels smashed, safety mechanisms disabled. It was a message. I reported it to Bennett and the sheriff, but no arrests were made. Marlene denied involvement, of course, but the implication was clear. The mountain had become a battlefield, and I was fighting a war with shadows. Still, as I stood amid the wreckage of my dreams, I knew one thing. I wasn't going anywhere. The next move was mine.